Let's demonstrate RDS, or Relational Database Services, in Amazon AWS. So typically, if you want to create your own database and host it, you would spin up or install an operating system on a computer, and then you have hundreds of databases to select from in this world, although only a handful of them are super popular. The problem, especially in the cloud, is that if you install a database on a particular instance, or an EC2 instance in the case of AWS, instances are not entirely stable and they can go away from time to time and just disappear, meaning that you better back up that database and be able to restore it, have the knowledge of how to do that. Overall, managing a database in production is a lot of hassle and requires a lot of expertise. So RDS, Relational Database Services, is a managed database service so that you only have to worry about creating your application, or as it relates to running your database. So creating your tables, optimizing it with stored procedures and triggers and things like that. But you don't have to worry about patching it for security, doing those sorts of updates, backing it up, restoring it, that sort of thing. If the computer that it's on actually fails, Amazon will take care of restoring that database for you. So let's go ahead and see how we would create an RDS database setup. So there are different types of databases. I'm clicking on RDS right there. I could also have done it from up here. RDS stands for relational. That's what it starts with. And just note that there are other types of databases. This is going to be specific to relational databases. So as I come to this page and I go to the dashboard, I'm first going to click on Create Database. And this is the area where I choose from a set of 6 different databases. Again, there's lots of others out there, but here are 6 relational databases that are available. I would recommend, if it's ever possible, to use the Amazon Aurora database. It is compatible with MySQL and Postgres. Therefore, it's very similar to MySQL, MariaDB, and Oracle. But it is faster than those, and it is more scalable than those, the way they've built it. So it's compatible with both, but it's basically more powerful than both of them, at least within their environment. Okay, so up here we have Standard Create or Easy Create, and I would recommend using Amazon Aurora when you have a chance. And you can select it for being MySQL compatible or Postgres compatible. Stick with provisioned for this example. Now, each of these databases, regardless of which one you select, has many different versions, and so you could select whatever is the most recent one. And then let's keep on scrolling down. Another important decision you have to make is, do you want the managed database service to be suitable for production or for dev test? Production is going to be a database setup that has a fail-safe instance running, so that if your primary database were to go down, another one is primed and ready to go and switch over automatically. Having multiple database instances running simultaneously is expensive, or more expensive than running one at least. And so only do this if you're actually going to be running a production workload and you can't have any downtime. If you're just testing, then you're just fine in that case with having one hosted one up there, and it's still backed up, but it's not really suited for high availability in case it were to go down and need to be restored relatively quickly without any downtime. So this could have basically high availability, and this could have a little bit of downtime while it recovers. This is going to have multiple instances running. This is going to have just one. Let me go ahead and click on Dev Test right now so that I have the option of minimizing my cost for demonstration purposes. I don't really care about the name. I do want to give it a password. I'll give it an insecure password while I'm doing this. As I scroll down, you have a list of databases that are possible, and within the T classes, you're going to have some less expensive ones. If you go and do an AWS calculator, anything with large in the name is going to be pretty expensive. If you go with burstable, you can get something that's small, like t3.small. If you're doing production ones, it's not going to give you the option of using really inexpensive ones. So these cheaper options are only available if you're choosing the dev test setup. Okay, scrolling down, this would toggle back and forth based on if you had selected production or dev test. Because I'm just doing test, I don't want this available in essentially more than one availability zone. I don't want it to be super scalable and that sort of thing because it's going to cost me a lot more money. Scrolling down here under connectivity, you get the choice of where among your VPCs do you want to host this particular database, which subnet do you want it to be in. You have to do a little bit of extra configuration in order to have not a regular subnet group, but a database subnet group. It's a unique thing. Do you want this to be public accessible or not? So the issue is if you don't make this thing publicly accessible, then you have to work through internal private IP addresses within your AWS environment in order to do things like create your initial tables and stuff like that. So something I'll commonly do is I will make it so that I can hit this thing publicly, like for example from a developer computer, while I'm setting up the tables and things like that. And then once I have things within its private environment connecting to it properly, then I'll take away the public access. But I find that I do need that to set it up initially. Maybe seed it with some initial data. Okay, as it relates to security groups, I recommend creating a new security group. Like right now, it's going with the default VPC for the VPC or the default security group for the VPC that I have selected. The problem is I know that doesn't allow port 3306 in this instance. So if you wanted to have the port open associated with your database, then you're going to have to create a new security group. So I'll just say my new security group, and I don't really care which data center / availability zone I put it in within this particular region. It would be in multiple data centers if this was a more highly available setup. As I pop this open, I'm setting this to run on 3306, which is associated with MySQL. And I don't really need to do anything else here, but I could see some other stuff if I wanted to. With that, I'm going to go ahead and click Create Database. Okay, and I was using an insecure password just because I plan to delete this shortly. Once this comes up, I will be able to see, well, looks like I can already see some stuff, but it takes it a good while before it's completely spun up and available for you to see some important information. Anyway, it says creating, and I could be here easily another 10-20 minutes before it's done with all of its setup. Now, the nice thing is that once it's set up, because it's a managed database, over here on automated backups and under snapshots, it's going to be regularly taking copies of the database so that if there was ever a problem with the underlying hardware that's running it, they are automatically going to restore that database from the backups for me, and I don't have to worry about anything. With this particular database, the important thing is going to be these endpoints. So these are the URLs that I can use to connect to my database once it is up and running after 20, 15 minutes, whatever it ends up being. So if you're familiar with connecting to databases, usually from any application, you type in like a username and a password. You set the URL of the actual database location. And that's usually about enough to get you into the database. And once it comes up, it'll give you an option for seeing what your connection information is, but it's really just the username and password that you set up on a previous page on this setup, plus one of these URLs. If you use more instances as part of your RDS cluster, then there will be many endpoints here. And so what's the point of that? Like, well, if you have a really big database set up, you might have many instances, and you can use a different URL for each of those instances so that you could distribute your traffic across all of those instances and not put all of the traffic based on just one of them. Okay, let's see if there's anything else worth mentioning here. So again, once this is completely up, this is just kind of the overall thing right there, but until this instance is ready, it's not actually going to be usable. Once this thing is completely, and oh, there you go, completed that, view connection details. So there you go. You got a username and a password, and I used an insecure password here because I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to connect to the database with that when I'm actually ready to use it. When you want to get rid of this database, you might think, and let me just kind of reload this page here, see if it changes any of the stuff in the interface. You have two different things here. One is kind of the indicator for your overall database, and then there's a whole bunch of individual instances here. The individual instances are the actual running databases. This is kind of like the overview managerial piece here. And so when you want to stop your database after like right now, so you don't get billed too much, you might think, or you might wonder, like, well, where do I shut down and delete this thing? Do I do it here or do I do it here? And so right here, we're going to have an option eventually of telling it to stop, but that is not the thing that we want to do. You don't, when this becomes available, which is while I was talking, it's now available, I could tell it to stop, but that's not and then right underneath it, it says delete, which implies that I need to stop it and then delete it. But you might spend 40 minutes waiting for that cycle to stop or to complete. What you actually do to get rid of this database that you just created is you go actions, and then you go delete right here. And it's going to ask you, do you want to take a snapshot? In this case, I don't have any data that I want to store. If I did have a snapshot, I could create future databases based on whatever's in here right now. But I don't want to create a snapshot. I know that I don't want anything available. So I'm going to click delete me and lose everything that's in there forever. So I click that. And what's going to happen now is that over the next 10-15 minutes, these little icons will change from deleting to deleted, and then eventually the whole thing will become empty. So that's how I get rid of the overall thing, is by deleting its instances, and then my environment will be all cleaned up.